I found them on the third day of the Velora's advisory, when the corridor authority had told everyone within 40 kilometers to stay put, and I had nothing better to do than walk the grain storage annex and check the humidity seals. The annex was the oldest structure on the depot property, poured stone, low ceiling, the kind of place that holds a temperature regardless of what the moon's atmosphere is doing outside. I used it for long-term dry goods storage, bags of supplemental grain base, cases of compressed fiber cultivation blocks, a pallet of atmospheric solution canisters that I kept meaning to shift to the secondary bay and never did. The seals on the east wall ran warm in the summer quarter and needed checking every 3 weeks or the moisture reading would drift up, and I would lose a corner of inventory to clumping. I noticed the atmospheric canisters had been moved first. Not moved far, shifted perhaps 2 meters, stacked carefully against the south wall, 3 columns of 4, with the same systematic attention that I would have given them myself. The stacking was precise. Same label forward, heaviest base. It was not how someone hides in a hurry. It was how someone rearranges a space because rearranging is how they think. Then I noticed that the space behind where the canisters had stood was occupied. 2 children, small, sitting very still, the way children sit when they are hoping not to be seen. Mint green skin, silver white hair, large pale eyes that caught the light from my inspection lamp and reflected it back at me with an expression I had seen before in this work. The careful, measuring look of someone who has learned that the next several seconds will determine a great deal. The older one was perhaps 6 or 7 by Veloran count. The younger one was close to 4. Both were wearing traveling clothes, good quality but worn from what looked like several days of hard use. The older one had a small bag over one shoulder with the strap shortened by a knot. She had adjusted it to fit herself. The younger one was holding a small flat stone in both hands, turning it over slowly the way children do when they are managing a feeling they don't have words for yet. I looked at them, they looked at me. I said, "Have you eaten today?" The older one said carefully, "We have rations." "That's not what I asked." A pause. The younger one's stone turning slowed. The older one's eyes did the arithmetic thing again. I was already learning that this was her primary mode of engagement with new information, which was to calculate before committing. "No," she said finally. I nodded. I went to the supply cabinet at the near end of the annex, the one I kept stocked for the workers who pulled early shifts and sometimes hadn't eaten before arrival, and I came back with 2 ration packs and a water canteen. Standard compact corridor issue, the kind that required no preparation and tasted like what they were, which was compressed nutrition and not much else. I set them down on the flat top of the nearest storage block within easy reach. "I'm going to keep checking the seals," I said. "Take your time." I turned and went back to the east wall and resumed checking the seals. Behind me, I heard the careful sounds of 2 children eating slowly and without noise, in the manner of children who have learned to be careful about the sounds they make. I noted the 4th seal was drifting 2 points above baseline summer quarter, as expected, and made the adjustment and wrote it in the inspection log. The 5th and 6th seals were within tolerance. The 7th was borderline but not yet actionable. I noted it for follow-up at the next inspection. When I finished the wall and turned back, the older one was watching me with the ration pack held in both hands, 3/4 finished. The younger one had fallen asleep against the south wall with the empty pack beside her and the canteen lid replaced with care. The flat stone was in her other hand, held loosely now. "My name is Dale," I said. "I manage this depot. You can stay here tonight. The annex is secure and the temperature holds steady. There's a cot in the secondary bay if you want it, or you can stay here." I paused. "Tomorrow I'm going to need to file a welfare intake. It's a form, it just puts you in the system so the corridor authority knows where you are. Is there someone I should contact?" The older one looked at me for a long time. The look was not frightened. It was the look of someone doing arithmetic on a problem with several variables. Not yet, she said finally. All right, I said. Not yet. I picked up my inspection log. I'll be in the main building if you need anything. There's a signal panel on the north wall of the annex. The green button calls the main building. If you press it twice, I'll know it's you and not an inventory alarm. I showed her the panel. She looked at it with the same focused attention she had given everything else. All right, she said. I went back to the main building. I wrote up the inspection log, entered the humidity adjustments in the maintenance record, and then I opened the welfare intake form and filled out everything I could fill out without asking the children for information they hadn't offered. Time found, location, approximate ages by Veloran developmental markers, physical condition, good, no apparent injury, adequate nutrition in recent days, items found with 1 travel bag, 2 adjusted strap configuration, 2 ration packs now consumed, 1 water canteen. I left the name fields blank and the contact fields blank and saved the draft. Then I made dinner, ate it, and went to sleep. In the morning, they were in the main building. Not in it exactly. They were in the yard outside the main building's east door, sitting on the equipment bench that ran along the wall, watching the depot's morning activity with the focused attention of children who are learning a new place. The older one had the bag in her lap. The younger one was eating something from the older one's hand, what appeared to be a piece of the compressed fiber cultivation block, broken off and offered in pieces. I noted that she had found the cultivation block supply, which meant she had been in the secondary storage bay, which meant she had been up earlier than I had and had been moving through the property without me hearing her. I added a mental note to check the secondary bay seals later. Then I added another note to make sure the secondary bay door was not latching incorrectly, because a 4-year-old had accessed it without difficulty. Good morning, I said. Good morning, the older one said. The younger one looked up and then looked back at the cultivation block piece. What's your name? I asked the older one. After a moment, Sale. And hers? Ven. I nodded. There's hot grain base on the kitchen counter, I said. The bowls are the ones with the green rim. They're the right size, the others are too big for smaller hands. Take what you need. I went to open the depot for the morning delivery. The morning delivery was a fuel cell restock from the Corridor Authority supply run, which was late by 40 minutes because of the advisory extension. They had kept the main road closed an additional half-day, and the driver had had to wait at the checkpoint. I knew this driver, a steady Veloran man named Kale who had run the corridor supply circuit for at least as long as I had managed the depot. He had a methodical way of doing the manifest check that I appreciated. We went through it item by item in the loading yard, which took most of an hour, and then I signed the receipt and we talked for a few minutes about the advisory extension and what the Corridor Authority was saying about the road condition on the north approach. By the time we had the fuel cells signed in and racked, and Kale's vehicle was gone, it was mid-morning. When I went back through the east door, Sale was sitting at the corner of the main desk with the spare inspection log open in front of her, making neat notations in Veloran script in the margin of the humidity section. I looked at this for a moment. The notations were in a small, precise hand. They appeared to be organized by seal number with date references. "What are you doing?" I said. She looked up calm, as if she had expected the question and had the answer ready. "Your humidity log format has an inefficiency," she said. "If you enter the baseline reading and the adjusted reading in the same column, you have to calculate the variance manually each time. If you add a variance column and enter the calculation as a formula when you move the log to the master file, you can see the drift pattern across the entire year without doing the arithmetic separately." I sat down in my chair and looked at the log and then at her notations and then at the log again. The notations were organized exactly as she described. She had not just identified the problem. She had already sketched the column structure and the formula notation. That's true, I said. I can reformat it if you want, she said. It will take about an hour. All right, I said. The master file is in the records cabinet on the second shelf. The label is current year +1, because I set up the next year's file at the start of the previous quarter. She found it without difficulty. It took an hour and 12 minutes. The result was substantially cleaner than the original format I had been using for 11 years, and I transferred it to the master file that afternoon and used it for every subsequent log entry without thinking about it very much. Then, in the meantime, had found the depot's small garden plot at the south end of the property. A 2x4-meter bed of mixed cultivation stock that I grew more out of habit than necessity, mostly vegetables, and some of the hardy Veloran ground cover varieties that the resettlement families sometimes asked about. She was sitting at the edge of it examining the soil with 2 fingers pressed into the surface, working them back and forth with the focused attention of someone taking a measurement. Then she sat back and looked at the plot from above, tilting her head to one side and then the other. I watched her do this for a moment from across the yard. Then I went back inside. I filed the welfare intake in the afternoon with the names I had now, Sale and Venn. Approximate ages, good physical condition, apparently capable of reading and writing in at least 2 scripts, demonstrated practical analytical skills. I submitted it to the Corridor Authority intake system and received an automated acknowledgement that the case had been assigned a reference number, and a case officer would follow up within 3 working days. That was satisfactory. I went back to work. The Velkith agents arrived on the 5th day of the advisory. The same morning the Corridor Authority lifted the road closure. There were 3 of them in a standard transit vehicle, the kind that the secondary placement houses used for what they called family reunification work, and what the Corridor Authority intake officers called, in the staff notes that sometimes got filed with the wrong case number, something rather different. I was in the loading yard signing in a produce delivery when the vehicle came through the depot gate. The lead agent was a tall Velkith male in a formal transit coordinator's coat, the standard field dress for secondary placement representatives. The other 2 stayed at the vehicle with the specific stillness of people who are positioned rather than waiting. He came over with a document in his hand, and the look of someone who expected the document to do most of the talking. "Depot manager," he said. "Yes," I said. He offered the document. "Velkith Placement Services. We have a dependency transfer authorization for 2 Veloran miners currently recorded at this location under a Corridor Authority. Welfare intake filed 4 days ago. We're here to complete the transfer." I took the document. I am not a lawyer. I am a supply depot manager with 17 years of Corridor Authority interaction, which is almost the same thing, practically speaking. I have seen most of the document formats that circulate on the resettlement corridor: supply manifests, authorization forms, bilateral welfare codes, transfer orders of various kinds. I know what they are supposed to look like, and I know what to look for when something is off. I read the document carefully. It was a dependency transfer authorization of the standard compact Veloran bilateral welfare variety. It looked correct at first reading: the right headers, the right reference formats, the compact bilateral welfare code cited in the right sequence, the transfer authority language in the 3rd paragraph, using the correct conditional phrasing for a contested dependency claim. The countersignature on the 2nd page was from a Velkith House administrative officer whose title was listed as Secondary Dependency Coordinator, House Velkith, Kesaldavar Resettlement Corridor District 3. I read the date on the countersignature. Then I read the date on the primary authorization. The primary authorization was dated 9 days ago. The advisory had started 8 days ago and closed all corridor transit for 5 days. The countersignature was dated 7 days ago. The countersigning officer had signed a document 2 days before it existed. I looked at this for a moment without looking up. I turned to the third page and read the filing reference at the bottom, which gave the submission date for the original transfer request. Then I looked at the countersignature date again. I handed the document back. "I can't accept this transfer today," I said. The lead agent's expression shifted slightly, not surprise, more the expression of someone running a practiced response protocol. "The authorization is valid under compact bilateral welfare provision. The countersignature is dated before the primary authorization," I said. 2 days before. That's a procedural irregularity. I'm required under Section 11 of the Compact Welfare Intake Protocol to hold the placement pending review when a procedural irregularity is identified. I'll file the hold notation with the Corridor Authority intake system this afternoon." A pause. He adjusted his posture slightly, the practiced adjustment of someone moving to a different script. "This may simply be a clerical dating error in the document processing system. These do occur." "They do," I said. "The review process is designed to handle them. The review office is at the Corridor Authority Administrative Hub. The intake system will send them a copy of the hold notation automatically when I file it, along with the case reference number and the specific irregularity noted. If the dating issue is a clerical error, the review office will confirm that and the transfer can proceed. If you'd like, I can give you the review office contact information." He looked at me for a moment with the look of someone recalculating. Behind him, the two at the vehicle had not moved. "We'll be in contact," he said. "Of course," I said. "The review office is open Monday through Friday. The case reference number is VWCA 447 SOVEND if your office needs it for the inquiry." They left. I signed in the rest of the produce delivery, thanked the driver, and went inside. I filed the hold notation with the Corridor Authority intake system, received an automated confirmation, and sat down to eat lunch. Sale was sitting at the corner of the desk where she had taken to sitting when she was in the main building. She had the secondary inventory ledger open. She had apparently been working her way through it systematically. She was watching me with the careful, measuring look. "You read the document," she said. "Yes," I said. "You found something wrong with it." "A dating error. The countersignature was dated before the document existed." She was quiet for a moment. "They've filed 3 of those in the last 4 months," she said. "Different districts, different placements, all Veloran secondary dependency claims." I put down my spoon. "You have documentation of the other cases." "Reference numbers," she said. "Sale keeps records." She said this in the third person in the way that children sometimes speak of themselves when the thing they are describing feels more like a system than a personal quality. She reached into the bag and produced a small notebook, written in the same precise hand she used for the humidity log notations. Cases VWKO 291, VWSA 318, and VWCA 402. All Velketh Placement Services filings. All Kesaldivar corridor or adjacent. All within the last 4 months. I took the notebook and read the reference numbers carefully. Then I opened the hold notation request I had already submitted and added a supplementary note, indicating that the guardian of the applicants had provided cross-reference case numbers, suggesting a pattern of procedural irregularities in Velketh Placement Services filings across multiple corridor districts, and appended all 4 reference numbers. Then I changed the submission destination from the District Review Office to the Regional Welfare Audit Division. I explained this choice to Sale when she asked why. The District Review Office is managed by the same administrative tier that processes the initial placement authorizations, I said. It's not that they're dishonest, they may simply be slow, or the pressure may come from above. The Audit Division reports directly to the Compact Bilateral Welfare Council. They have independent authority to suspend the placement mechanism if they identify a systematic pattern. She looked at me steadily. You've done this before. Not exactly this, I said, but I've seen placement irregularities before, smaller ones, earlier in my time on this corridor. You learn which office actually investigates and which one processes. She nodded slowly, the nod of someone filing information accurately. The Corridor Authority intake system sent a revised acknowledgement 40 minutes later, indicating that the hold had been escalated to the Regional Welfare Audit Division, and an inquiry reference had been opened. I went back to work. Ven had decided by the 6th day that the garden plot was her domain. She had reorganized the cultivation blocks in the south corner of the annex in a way that I could not immediately interpret, but which Sale told me reflected a Veloran soil assessment methodology. The depth and texture gradients in the blocks were being used as a physical model for planning the spring rotation. The blocks were arranged in a grid pattern, with certain ones elevated on sections of flat stone and others inverted to expose their base texture, which apparently indicated drainage behavior. I looked at the arrangement for a while. It was more systematic than it looked at first. Ven also began, without being asked, to water the existing garden plot every morning. She used the small watering tool from the shed. She had found it herself, in the corner where I kept it, and was very methodical about it. East row to west, then the outer perimeter, then the center, then standing back to assess. She held the watering tool in both hands and moved with the deliberate care of someone who understands that how you do a thing matters as much as that you do it. I noted this, and on the afternoon of the 7th day, bought an additional packet of mixed cultivation seed at the supply run. I had been meaning to buy it for some time. The north end of the plot had been empty for 2 seasons, and it bothered me in the mild way that unfinished things bother a person after long enough. I left the packet on the equipment bench when I came back. In the afternoon, Ven came inside holding the packet, still in both hands, and stood in front of the desk and looked at me for a moment with the serious, direct look she had that was different from Sale's assessing look, less arithmetic, more declaration. "There's a good spot at the north end," she said. "I thought so too," I said. "That's why I got the packet." She went back outside and planted half of it at the north end in a careful spiral pattern, working from the outside in and pressing each seed to the same depth with her thumb. I watched her from the window while I finished the afternoon paperwork. She did not hurry. She did not leave gaps. Sale, meanwhile, had finished the initial humidity log reformatting and moved on to the secondary inventory ledger, which she was auditing with the same methodical attention. She came to me on the 7th afternoon with a 3-page summary, written in the same small, precise hand, organized by supply category and date of last physical count, with the discrepancies cross-referenced against the master supply orders. The discrepancies were not dramatic. A missing case of atmospheric solution canisters that turned out to be in the secondary bay rather than the main bay. They had been shifted during a restock 8 months ago and logged at the wrong location. A count error in the compressed fiber cultivation blocks that had been propagating through the quarterly audits for approximately 2 years, probably from a single entry mistake at the original count that had never been caught because the discrepancy was small enough to be within the acceptable variance range. And 2 line items in the produce category, where the unit size had changed when the supplier updated their packaging, and the ledger had not been adjusted to reflect it. The summary was clean, and the cross-references were accurate. The format was better than anything I had produced in the same line, including the original audit template I had been using since year 3. I asked her, on the morning of the 8th day, while she was working through the correction entries, whether she had done this kind of work before. She considered the question with the specific care she gave to accurate answers. "My mother keeps records," she said. "She says that everything important is in the records if you know how to read them. I've been learning to keep records the way she does. Your mother sounds like a sensible person, I said. She is, Sale said, a pause. She's been watching the depot. I put down my pen. For how long? Since the third day. There's a ridge point about 2 kilometers north with clear sightlines to the main building and the yard and the loading area. She goes there in the morning and checks in the evening. Sale's voice was completely steady. She knows where we are and that we're safe. She's waiting to see something. I thought about this for a moment. I thought about what she had seen. The welfare intake, the hold notation, the audit division escalation, the cultivation seed on the equipment bench. When she's ready, I said, she can come in through the main gate. It's open during depot hours 6 to 6. I picked up my pen again. The third shelf count, I think you're right that it's a transfer error from the last quarterly. If you pull the original quarterly submission, it should show the discrepancy source. Sale pulled the quarterly submission. I was right about the source. She made the correction entry and went on to the next item. She came on the 9th day in the middle of the morning through the main gate, on foot, wearing a plain traveling coat and boots that had been on a lot of difficult terrain recently. Copper rose skin, silver white hair worn simply, tied back in the way that people tie their hair back when they are doing work and not performing anything. Pale amber eyes, clear and direct. She was perhaps 10 years younger than me, and she carried herself with the particular quality of someone who is very used to being watched and has decided, for today, to be watched plainly. I was in the yard doing the morning perimeter check. I saw her come through the gate and I said, "Good morning." "Good morning," she said. We looked at each other. "Sale and Ven are in the main building," I said. "Sale is probably correcting the produce ledger. Ven was in the garden when I came through. She was assessing the north end planting she did yesterday." The woman looked toward the main building, then toward the south end of the yard where the garden was visible. Her expression was one I recognized, the particular stillness of a person who has been holding a weight for long enough that putting it down feels unfamiliar. "I know," she said. "I could see the garden from the ridge." "Ven's been expanding it," I said. "She has a planting methodology, spiral pattern outside in consistent depth. It's better than what I was doing." Something shifted in her expression, not quite a smile. The involuntary softening of someone who has been braced against something, and found that the thing is not the shape she was braced for. "She does," she said. "She has always had a methodology." She was looking at me with the calm, direct attention of someone conducting an assessment. Not the arithmetic look Sale had, something more patient than that, more experienced at waiting for the right information rather than processing all available information immediately. "The Velkoth hold," she said. "Filed yesterday afternoon," I said. "Escalated to the Regional Audit Division. I had 4 cross-reference case numbers from Sale, VWKO 291, VWSA 318, VWCA 402, and the current case. I included them in the supplementary note. The Audit Division sent an inquiry reference by evening. You filed with the Audit Division rather than the District Review Office. The District Review Office reports to the same administrative tier that processes the placement authorizations. The Audit Division has independent authority and reports to the Bilateral Welfare Council. If there's a systematic pattern across cases, the Audit Division is more likely to identify it and act on it." She was quiet for a moment. "That's not something most depot managers would know." 17 years on this corridor," I said. "I've seen placement irregularities before. You learn which office actually investigates." She nodded slowly. "Then, my name is Reth Velorin." I knew enough about the Velorin succession structure to understand that this was a significant name, not in a way that changed what I had done or what I would do next, but I understood now why the placement agents had filed a predated transfer order and I understood why a mother had watched from a ridge point for 6 days before coming through the gate. "Dale Soven," I said, "supply depot manager." "I know," she said, 17 years. "Come inside," I said. "The grain tea is on." Sale found it in the secondary cabinet on the second day and commandeered it. "I've been drinking it too, it's better than what I had before." She made a small sound at that, a breath of something. We went inside. She stayed for 3 days. It was not a complicated 3 days. The difficult part, the welfare hold, the audit escalation, the document review was already done. What remained was the practical work of filing the follow-up materials and confirming the situation with the relevant offices, which Reth handled through a secured relay device at the main desk. I ran the depot. Sale helped me with the secondary bay reorganization that I had been putting off for most of the spring, shifting the atmospheric solution canisters to the correct location, adjusting the cultivation block count to reflect the corrected ledger, relabeling 3 shelves that had been mislabeled since a reorganization 2 years ago. It went faster with 2 people and her method for the block stacking, which arranged them so the identification labels faced outward regardless of which shelf level they were on. Then planted the second half of the seed packet. Then she went back to the first half's planting and made adjustments. She had realized, she told Sale, who told me, that the spiral had started at the wrong radius and the center cluster would be too dense. She corrected this with the focused precision of someone who does not find it difficult to undo work in order to do it correctly. On the second day, the Regional Audit Division sent a preliminary response acknowledging receipt of the cross-referenced case files and indicating that a formal audit inquiry had been opened. On the third day, a compact corridor authority representative came to take statements. I gave mine at the main desk, a straightforward account of what I had found in the document, what I had filed, and what the cross-reference case numbers contained. Reth's statement was longer. She gave it in the small conference room at the end of the main building with the door closed, and it took most of the afternoon. After the corridor authority representative left, Sale came and sat at the corner of the main desk and looked at me with the measuring look for a while. I waited. I had learned that she did this when she was working out how to say something accurately. "You didn't ask who she was," she said, "before she told you." "It wasn't necessary for what I was doing," I said. The hold was filed based on the document. The document had a procedural error. The identity of the person the agents were looking for didn't change that. "Most people would have wanted to know," she said. "Most people would have done a lot of things differently," I said. "I don't know what differently looks like in those cases. I know what I was looking at." Sale considered this. "The Velkith agents knew who we were," she said. "That's why they filed the transfer order. It wasn't a standard placement. They were trying to use the dependency provision to establish a custodial claim before the succession window closed. If the claim was established before the window, it would have required a formal challenge through the Veloran Succession Council, which would have taken months and would have been costly. I had understood this, approximately, by the third day of the advisory. I had not said so because it had not needed to be said. "The hold stops that," I said. "For now," she said, "until the succession window closes. Then there's no legal basis for the claim even if the hold is eventually resolved in Velkith's favor." "When does the window close?" 53 days. I thought about this. "The audit inquiry will be active for at least that long," I said. "The audit division doesn't move quickly, but it moves deliberately. An active inquiry creates a compliance obligation on Velkith placement services for the duration." "My mother understands that," Sale said. "She's been in contact with the Bilateral Welfare Council directly. The audit inquiry helps. It means the council has an active interest." "Good," I said. There was a pause. "You've been running the depot with 2 additional people for 9 days," Sale said. You reorganized your schedule. You moved your morning inspection to the afternoon so the yard was clear when the welfare representative came. You filed 3 separate documents with the corridor authority. You bought cultivation seed. The garden plot needed expanding, I said. I'd been meaning to buy the seed for some time. The north end has been empty for 2 seasons. She looked at me for a long moment. She had, I had come to understand, a very precise relationship with the things she said and did not say. She chose her words with the same care she gave the humidity log variance column, not for effect, but because accuracy mattered and she had already done the arithmetic to know what was true. My sister and I talked about it, she said. On the 4th day, when you filed the hold and we heard the automated confirmation come through the terminal, we talked for a long time after you went to do the evening seal check. I waited. Ven said she wanted someone who noticed things the right way, she said. She meant that she wanted someone who noticed what was actually there. Not what was significant, not what required a particular response, just what was there and needed attending to. She paused. I said that you had noticed what was needed without noticing that it was significant. You gave us ration packs because we hadn't eaten. You filed the welfare intake because that was the correct form. You read the Velkoth document carefully because reading documents carefully is what you do. That's accurate, I said. We decided, she said in the same precise, deliberate voice, that was what we wanted. I put down my pen and looked at her. You and Ven decided, I said. Yes. To choose me as your father. She met my eyes with the calm directness that was her natural register, not a child's hesitation, not a performance of certainty, just the statement of a thing that had been assessed carefully and was now being conveyed accurately. Yes. I had been a supply depot manager for 17 years on the Kessaldivar resettlement corridor. I had managed fuel cell deliveries and humidity seal inspections and welfare intake forms and Section 11 procedural holds. I had audited ledgers and corrected count errors and reorganized secondary bays and filed cross-reference documentation with the Regional Welfare Audit Division. I had not in 17 years been chosen as a father by 2 small Veloran girls who had assessed the situation from a grain storage annex on the 4th day and reached a conclusion. I see, I said. Ven wanted me to tell you that the North End planting is doing well, she said. She checked it this morning before breakfast. She says the correction to the inner cluster was the right decision. I thought so too, I said. The original radius would have crowded the center by mid-season. Sale nodded, with the slightly formal air she had when something important had been settled and could now be filed. She picked up the secondary bay ledger and opened it to the 4th shelf section. There's still a discrepancy in the 4th shelf count, she said. I think it's the same propagating error from the quarterly audit, but I need to confirm the original entry date. The quarterly archive is in the records cabinet, I said. 2nd shelf, same labeling system as the humidity log. She went to the records cabinet. I went back to work. Reth came to find me in the early evening of the 3rd day, when the light was going long and gold across the depot yard, and the Kessaldivar moon was doing what it did in the summer quarters late afternoon, turning the dust in the air into something that looked almost like intention. She brought 2 cups of the grain tea. She handed me one without asking, and I took it. We stood at the east end of the yard where there was a clear line of sight to the garden and to the main building and to the ridge to the north where she had spent 6 days watching. The ridge was just visible as a dark line at the edge of the flat distance. I watched this depot for 6 days before I came through the gate, she said. I know, I said. Sale told me. She told you on the 8th day, she said. She waited until she was sure you would find it useful to know rather than worrying. She was right, I said. The 8th day was the right time. Reth was quiet for a moment. I watched what you did when you found them, she said. I watched what you did with the document. I watched what you did when you didn't know who I was, what you had already done before you had any reason to do it. 6 days of watching a man manage a supply depot and feed my children and correct a humidity log. She paused. I've been doing this kind of assessment for most of my professional life. I know what I'm looking for and I know when I've seen it. What were you looking for? I said. Whether you treated my daughters as people who needed things, she said, or as people who needed to be managed, as a problem that required a response, or as children who had not eaten. I considered this. They needed to eat, I said. And the humidity log format had an inefficiency. She made a small sound that was not quite a laugh but had the quality of something genuine in it. The kind of sound that happens when a thing is more true than the person who said it knew. They told me about the humidity log, she said. Sale was very pleased with the variance column. She says it will save you approximately 4 minutes per inspection, and that the drift pattern over a year is visually obvious now in a way that prevents the kind of slow degradation that the old format missed. She's right, I said. Ven says the garden was waiting for someone who would pay attention to it properly, she said. Those are her words. She says the soil in the north section is better than the south because it gets more morning light, and whoever planted there before didn't account for that. I didn't account for it either, I said. She figured it out. She often does, Reth said quietly. In the garden, Ven was doing her evening check of the planting. She moved east to west along the north section first, crouching to look at each area at soil level, then standing to look at the whole. Then the south section the same way. Then she stood back and looked at the whole plot together for a while with the expression of someone satisfying themselves that the world is, at this particular moment, in order. The succession window, I said, 53 days. 51 now, she said. The audit inquiry will run longer than that. The Bilateral Welfare Council's active interest gives you standing for the full duration. Yes, she said. I've confirmed that with the council directly. The placement mechanism is suspended while the inquiry is active. She drank the grain tea. There are still places we need to be in the next several weeks, things to complete before the window closes. But the most dangerous period, the period when the Velkoth filing could have moved quickly enough to preempt the window, is past. I nodded. The inventory audit is complete, I said. Sale finished the 4th shelf this afternoon. The master ledger is clean for the first time in 2 years. I'm going to set a quarterly verification date, going forward to make sure the errors don't propagate again. She mentioned that, Reth said. She seemed satisfied. She should be, I said. It was careful work. Ven straightened up in the garden and looked at the north end planting for a long moment. Then she looked back toward us. She raised one hand, a brief, serious wave, the way she did everything. I raised mine back. She nodded, apparently satisfied, and went back to assessing the south section. I need to know, Reth said, after a moment, what you understand about what Sale told you. I thought about how to say it accurately. I had been thinking about it since Sale said it, turning it over the way Ven turned her flat stone, not to defer the decision, but to make sure I was seeing it right. I understand that your daughters made a decision, I said. I understand it was deliberate. Sale doesn't arrive at conclusions carelessly. She does the arithmetic first, and then she says what she found. I paused. I understand that it's not a small thing that they said. I understand that what it means going forward is something I don't know all of yet. I looked at the ridge in the distance. But I also understand that the way you're asking the question is the way Sale asks questions. You want to know if I heard it, and if I'm going to sit with it seriously or manage it. Reth was quiet for a long moment. Yes, she said. I heard it, I said. I'm going to sit with it seriously. I don't know yet what that looks like in practice, but I'm not going to pretend I didn't hear it, and I'm not going to tell Sale that what she said was too large for a supply depot. She looked out at the yard. The long light was going now, softening into the deep blue and amber of the Kesaldivar moon's evening. The colors it did particularly well at this latitude, at this time of year, as if the moon knew it had a reputation to maintain. "My mother will want to meet you," she said. "When the succession window is closed and the audit is filed, she'll want to meet the man Sale and Ven chose." "I'll be here," I said. "I know," she said. She said it the way Sale said things. Without announcement, because the fact was accurate and accuracy was enough. The succession window closed on a Tuesday, 51 days later. The Regional Audit Division filed its interim report the same week, and the Compact Bilateral Welfare Council issued a suspension order on Velketh Placement Services dependency transfer authorizations pending full review across all 4 corridor districts with documented irregularities. I heard about this from the Corridor Authority intake officer who called to update the case file, not from Reth. She was not, in the weeks after she and the girls had gone on to wherever they needed to be, the kind of person who sent updates about things already in hand. She sent one message, 10 days after they left. Brief, in the efficient style she had, which was not curt but was unadorned. It said that Sale had been asking about the 3rd shelf count resolution and whether the master ledger had been fully updated for the autumn cycle. It said that Ven had planted something at their current location and had a question about drainage for clay-heavy soil, east to west rows or spiral from center. I replied that the master ledger was updated and clean. For clay-heavy soil, the east to west method worked for established plots, but for new planting a spiral from the center outward was better because it distributed the drainage load more evenly and prevented the center density problem she had already identified and corrected here. The reply came the next day. A single line in Ven's hand, she had apparently written it herself, which meant someone had transcribed it for her, which meant Sale, which meant it had been a deliberate communication rather than a dictation. I tried the spiral. It is better. I filed the message in the case folder and went back to work. There is a thing that happens in depot management after enough years on the same corridor. You stop being surprised by the situations that pass through, not because the situations are not interesting. They are, often, considerably more interesting than supply management has any obligation to be. But after 17 years, you understand that the resettlement corridor is a place where things are in motion, and what you are is a fixed point, and your job is to be a reliable fixed point while things are passing through. What I had not understood until that summer on the Kessaldivar corridor was that a fixed point can also be something that is chosen, that the reliability itself, not despite its ordinariness, but because of it, can be the quality that someone is looking for. Sale and Ven's grandmother brought the first seat to meet me in the following spring. Not with ceremony. There were 4 people in the vehicle, and the first seat was a compact, precise woman in her late 60s with white braided hair and amber eyes, and the quality of someone who has been reading situations accurately for long enough that the reading has become invisible, like breathing. She walked the depot yard and asked specific questions about the secondary bay organization and the humidity log format, and the Section 11 filing process, and the audit division escalation. I answered them. She listened to the answers with the careful attention of someone confirming a conclusion already reached rather than forming a new one. Before she left, she stood at the south end of the yard and looked at the garden plot for a moment. It was nearly twice its original size. The north section Ven had planted, established now through 1 full season. The section Sale had laid out during her 9 days, which I had maintained through the autumn and which had come back well in the spring, and a new corner at the east end that I had added in the winter, during the quiet months, because the space was there, and it seemed like a reasonable use of it. Sale designed that section, the first seat said, indicating Sale's section. Yes, I said. She laid it out on the 5th day. She had a methodology for the spacing based on the soil gradient along that edge. The first seat looked at it for a moment longer. And the east corner, she said. Mine, I said. I added it in the winter. I'd been meaning to expand that end for some time. She nodded, once with the slightly formal air that I recognized from sail, the nod that meant a thing had been assessed and settled. I expect we'll be seeing more of each other, she said. The gate is open during depot hours, I said, 6 to 6, though I'm generally on the property from 5. She made the small sound, the almost laugh, the genuine thing. Then she got back in the vehicle and they left. I went inside and updated the spring cultivation log, and filed the weekly supply report and ate dinner and went to sleep. The humidity log format is still sales. The variance column has been in place for nearly a year, and I have not once had to calculate drift manually, which saves approximately 4 minutes per inspection. Over the course of a year, that is something like 12 hours returned to other work, which is not a small thing. The garden is better than it has ever been. I did not do anything in those 9 days that I would not have done for any 2 children I found in my grain annex during an advisory. I noticed what was there. I provided what was needed. I read the documents carefully and filed the paperwork correctly. I bought the cultivation seed I had been meaning to buy for 2 seasons. Sale told me later that this was exactly the point. I told her that I was glad the point was something I had already been doing, because I did not think I would have been very good at doing it on purpose. She considered this in the way she considered all things, the arithmetic, then the answer. No, she said finally, probably not. She went back to the ledger. I went back to work.